Tom Not Steel Ads, Brigid Seamus here, and welcome back to RDR2 Horse and Facts. So, this next breed that I am about to do is actually the third breed that I have in Red Dead Redemption 2 Online, which is actually one of my favorite breeds of all time. This one we're doing is the Arabian. Oh yeah, for those who are huge fans of the Arabian, you guys are about to learn all about this beautiful horse. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Arabian or Arab horse is a breed of horse that originated on the Arabian Peninsula, which I think is how it got its name, with a distinctive head shape and high tail carriage. The Arabian is one of the most easily recognizable horse breeds in the world. It is also one of the oldest breeds, with archaeological evidence of horses in the Middle East that resemble model Arabians dating back 4,500 years. Throughout history, Arabian horses have spread around the world by both war and trade, used to improve other breeds by adding speed, refinement, endurance, and strong bone. Today, Arabian bloodlines are found in almost every modern breed of riding horse. Interesting. The Arabian developed in a desert climate and was prized by the nomadic Bedouin people, often being brought inside the family tent for shelter and protect from theft. What? Okay, that's actually pretty crazy. Selective breeding for traits including an ability to form a cooperative relationship with humans created a horse breed that is good-natured, quick to learn, and willing to please. Pretty much like me. Sort of. The Arabian also developed the high spirit and alertness needed in a horse used for raiding and war. This combination of willingness and sensitivity requires modern Arabian horse owners to handle their horses with competence and respect, which is what I would do if I ever got one of these horses. The Arabian is a versatile breed. Arabians dominate the discipline of endurance riding and compete today in many other fields of equestrian sport, whatever that is. They are one of the top 10 most popular horse breeds in the world. They are now found worldwide, including the United States and Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, continental Europe, South America, especially Brazil, and their land of origin, the Middle East. So, first up, the breed characteristics. Arabian horses have refined wedge-shaped heads, a broad forehead, large eyes, large nostrils, and small muzzles. Most display a distinctive concave or dished profile. Many Arabians also have a slight forehead bulge between their eyes, called the jibba by the Bedouin, which is Arabic, I think. That adds additional sinus capacity, believed to have helped the Arabian horse in its native dry desert climate. Another breed characteristic in a arched neck with a large, well-set windpipe set on a refined, clean throat latch. This structure of the pole and throat latch was called the mitba or mitbed by the Bedouin. In the ideal Arabian, it is long, allowing flexibility in the bridle and room for the windpipe, of which I'm guessing is the part that's like down here somewhere. Other distinctive features are a relatively long level croup or top of the hindquarters and a naturally high tail carriage, which is pretty much why the tail is higher up mostly more than other breeds. The USEF breed standard requires Arabians have a solid bone and standard correct equine conformation. Well-bred Arabians have a deep, well-angled hip and well-laid back shoulder. Within the breed, there are variations. Some individuals have wider, more powerfully muscled hindquarters, suitable for intense bursts of activity in events such as raining, while others have longer, leaner, muscling better suited for long stretches of flat work, such as endurance riding and horse racing. Or horse racing. Must have a compact body with a short back. Arabians usually have dense, strong bone and, and good hoof walls. They are especially noted for their endurance and the superiority of the breed in endurance riding competition demonstrates that well-bred Arabians are strong, sound horses with superior stamina. And international FEI-sponsored endurance events, Arabians and Afro-Arabians are the dominant performers in distant competition. Now to the skeletal analysis, of which, real quick, guys, that is what the Arabian looks like as a skeleton. So as it says here, mounted skeleton of an Arabian horse, showing underlying structure of the breed characteristics, including short back, high set tail, distinction between level croup and well angulated hip. This specimen also has only 5 lumbar vertebrae. So this, guys, is the skeleton of the Arabian. And as you can see, the tail there is like slightly taller, and the head is like differently shaped. So that's actually pretty cool. And I've always loved Arabians, because to me, Arabians are very special horses. So yeah, the skeletal analysis. Some Arabians, though not all, have 5 lumbar vertebrae instead of the usual 6, and 17 pairs of ribs rather than 18. A quality Arabian has both a relatively horizontal croup and a properly angled pelvis, as well as good croup length and depth to the hip, determined by the length of the pelvis. That's kind of awkward. That allows agility and impulsion. A misconception confuses the top line of the croup with the angle of the hip, the pelvis or ilium, leading some to assert that Arabians have a flat pelvis angle and cannot use their hindquarters properly. However, the croup is formed by the sacral vertebrae. The hip angle is determined by the attachment of the ilium to the spine. The structure and length of the femur and other aspects of hindquarter anatomy, which is not correlated to the top line of the sacrum. Thus, the Arabian has conformation typical of other horse breeds built for speed and distance, such as the thoroughbred, where the angle of the ilium is more oblique than that of the croup. Thus, the hip angle is not necessarily correlated to the top line of the croup. Horses bred to gallop need a good length of croup and good length of hip for proper attachment of muscles. And so, unlike angle, length of hip and croup do go together as a rule. Now, onto the size. Now, honestly, Arabians are actually smaller than normal horses, because most horses you see, like the Clydesdale, those horses are huge. This horse is a lot smaller. So, after I read about the size, y'all are actually going to be surprised of how small this horse is. The breed standards stated by the United States Equestrian Federation describes Arabians as standing between 14.1 to 15 point hands, or 57 to 61 inches, or 145 to 155 centimeters tall, with occasional individual over or under. Thus, all Arabians, regardless of height, are classified as horses, even though 14.2 hands, 58 inches, or 147 centimeters is the traditional cutoff height between a horse and a pony. A common myth is that Arabians are not strong because they are relatively small and refined. However, the Arabian horse is noted for a greater density of bone than other breeds, short cannons, sound feet, and a broad, short back, all of which give the breed physical strength comparable to many taller animals. Thus, even a smaller Arabian can carry a heavy rider for tasks where the sheer weight of the horse matters, such as farm work done by a draft horse. Any lighter weight horse is at a disadvantage. However, however, for most purposes, the Arabian is a strong and hardy light horse breed able to carry any type of rider in most equestrian pursuits. Now, the temperament. Now, from trying to tame one in single player, Arabians have very short fuses, so the temperament here is actually very important. So whenever you have a Arabian, and whenever you actually get an Arabian for the first time in Red Dead Redemption 2, you need to know about their temperament, because these horses can be a bit stubborn. For centuries, Arabian horses lived in the desert in close association with humans. For shelter and protection from theft, prize war mares were sometimes kept in their owner's tent, close to children and everyday family life. Only horses with a naturally good disposition were allowed to reproduce, with the result that Arabians today have a good temperament that, among other examples, makes them one of the few breeds where the United States Equestrian Federation rules allow children to exhibit stallions in nearly all show ring classes, including those limited to riders under 18. On the other hand, the Arabian is also classified as a hot-blooded breed, a category that includes other refined, spirited horses bred for speed, such as the Akal Teke, the Barb, and the Thoroughbred. Like other hot bloods, Arabian sensitivity and intelligence enable quick learning and greater communication with their riders. However, their intelligence also allows them to learn bad habits as quickly as good ones, and they do not tolerate inept or abusive training practices. Some sources claim that it is more difficult to train a hot-blooded horse. Though most Arabians have a natural tendency to cooperate with humans, when treated badly, like any horse, they can become excessively nervous and or anxious, but seldom become vicious unless seriously spoiled or subjected to extreme abuse. At the other end of the spectrum, romantic myths are sometimes told about Arabian horses that give them a near divine characteristics. Ooh, that's special. So now the colors. Now Arabians come in a variety of different colors. Although currently in Red Dead Redemption 2, the Arabians come in gray, red, black, and white. But in online, they only come in red, white, and black. I have a red chestnut Arabian, so y'all are about to learn the colors that they come in. The Arabian Horse Association registers purebred horses with the coat colors bay, gray, chestnut, black, and roan. Bay, gray, and chestnut are the most common. Black is less common. The classic roan gene does not appear to exist in Arabians. Rather, Arabians registered by breeders as roan are usually expressing Rabicano or sometimes Sabino patterns with roan features. All Arabians, no matter their coat color, have black skin except under white markings. Black skin provided protection from the intense desert sun, or the other way around. Gray and white. Although many Arabians appear to have a white hair coat, they are not genetically white. This color is usually created by the natural action of the gray gene, and virtually all white-looking Arabians are actually grays. A specialized colorization seen in some older gray Arabians is the so-called bloody shoulder, which is a particular type of flea-bitten gray with localized aggregations of pigment on the shoulder. There are a very few Arabians registered as white, having a white coat, pink skin, and dark eyes from birth. These animals are believed to manifest a new form of dominant white, a result of a nonsense mutation in DNA tracing to a single stallion foaled in 1996. This horse was originally thought to be a Sabino, but actually was found to have a new form of dominant white mutation, now labeled W3. It is possible that white mutations have occurred in Arabians in the past, or that mutations other than W3 exist but have not been verified by genetic testing. Now, Sabino. One spotting pattern, Sabino, does exist in purebred Arabians. Sabino coloring is characterized by white markings such as high whites above the knees and hocks, irregular spotting on the legs, belly, and face, white markings that extend beyond the eyes or under the chin and jaw, and sometimes lacy or rounded edges. The genetic mechanism that produces Sabino patterning in Arabians is undetermined, and more than one gene may be involved. Studies at the University of California, Davis indicate that Arabians do not appear to carry the autosomal dominant gene SB1 or Sabino1. That often produces bold spotting and some completely white horses in other breeds. The inheritance patterns observed in Sabino-like Arabians also do not follow the same mode of inheritance as Sabino 1. Rabicano or Roan. There are very few Arabians registered as Roan, and according to researcher Dr. Phillips Sonnenberg, Roaning in purebred Arabians is actually the action of Rabicano genetics. Unlike a genetic roan, Rabicano is a partial roan-like pattern. The horse does not have intermingled white and solid hairs over the entire body. Only on the midsection and flanks, the head and legs are solid colored. Some people also confuse a young gray horse with a roan because of the intermixed hair colors common to both. However, a roan does not consistently lighten with age, while a gray does. Colors that do not exist in purebreds. Purebred Arabians never carry dilution genes. Therefore, purebreds cannot be colors such as den, cremello, palomino, or buckskin. However, there is pictorial evidence from pottery and tombs in ancient Egypt suggesting that spotting patterns may have existed on ancestral Arabian horses in antiquity. Nonetheless, purebred Arabians today do not carry genes for pinto or leopard complex or Appaloosa spotting patterns except for Sabino. Spotting or excess white was believed by many breeders to be a mark of impurity until DNA testing for verification of percentage became standard. For a time, horses with belly spots and other white markings deemed excessive were discouraged from registration, and excess white was sometimes penalized in the show ring. To produce horses with some Arabian characteristic but coat colors not found in purebreds, they have to be crossbred with other breeds, though the purebred Arabian produces a limited range of potential colors. They do not appear to carry any color-based lethal disorders such as the frame ovro gene, or O, that can produce a lethal white syndrome, or LWS, which was the beginning of my old Xbox Live gamer tag, except that mine was Lomo Scorpio and not lethal white syndrome, which this is actually interesting. Because purebred Arabians cannot produce LWS foals, Arabian mares were used as a non-affected population in some of the studies seeking that gene that caused the condition in other breeds. Nonetheless, purebred Arabian offspring can, in some cases, carry these genes if the non-Arabian parent was a carrier. Okay, well, this is something that you don't hear about very often in horses. Well, at least most animals. Genetic disorders, which that's like autism, but in a different way. There are 6 known genetic disorders in Arabian horses. 2 are inevitably fatal. 2 are not inherently fatal, but are disabling and usually result in euthanasia of the affected animal. The remaining conditions can usually be treated. 3 are thought to be autosomal recessive conditions, which means that the flawed gene is not a sex linked and has to come from both parents for an effective foal to be born. The others currently lack sufficient research data to determine the precise mode of inheritance. Arabians are not the only breed of horse to have problems with inherited diseases. Fatal or disabling genetic conditions also exist in many other breeds, including the American Quarter Horse, American Paint Horse, American Saddlebred, Appaloosa, Miniature Horse, and Belgian. Genetic diseases that can occur in purebred Arabians or in parbreds with Arabian ancestry in both parents are the following: a severe combined immunodeficiency, or SCID, recessive disorder, fatal with homozygous, carries heterozygous, show no signs. Similar to the bubble boy conditions in humans, an affected foal is born with a complete lack of an immune system, and thus generally dies of an opportunistic infection, usually before the age of 3 months. There is a DNA test that can detect healthy horses who are carriers of the gone-causing SCID. Thus, testing and careful planned matings can now eliminate the possibility of an affected foal ever being born. Lavender foal syndrome, or LFS, also called coat color delusion lethal, or double CDL, recessive disorder, fatal with homozygous carriers show no signs. The condition has its name because most affected foals are born with a coat delusion that lightens the tips of the coat hairs, or even the entire hair shaft. Foals with LFS are unable to stand at birth, often have seizures, and are usually euthanized within a few days of birth. In November 2009, Cornell University announced that a DNA test has been developed to detect carriers of LFS. Simultaneously, the University of Pretoria also announced that they had also developed a DNA test. Cerebellar atrophy, CCA, recessive disorder. Homozygous horses are affected. Carriers show no signs. An affected foal is usually born without clinical signs, but at some stage, usually after 6 weeks of age, develops severe incoordination, a head tremor, a wide-legged stance, and other symptoms related to the death of the Purkinje cells in the cerebellum. Such foals are frequently diagnosed only after they have crashed into a fence or fallen over backwards, and often are misdiagnosed as suffering from a head injury caused by an accident. Severity varies, with some foals having fast onset of severe coordination problems, others showing milder signs. Midly affected horses can live a full lifespan, but most are euthanized before adulthood because they are so accident prone as to be dangerous. As of 2008, there is a genetic test that uses DNA markers associated with CA to detect both carriers and affected animals. Clinical signs are distinguishable from other neurological conditions, and a diagnosis of CA can be varied by examining the brain after euthanasia. So this guy's gonna be a long one. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. Oh, and yeah, I went on the Nickel Play Road 765 excursion last night, which I have it up here on my channel. So if you guys haven't seen that, go check it out. It was absolutely amazing. So anyway, Back to the gorgeous and sexy Arabians. Yeah, I just called Arabians sexy. Occipital atlantoaxial malformation, or OAAM. This is a condition where the occiput, atlas, and axis vertebrae in the neck and at the base of the skull are fused or malformed. Symptoms range from mild incoordination to paralysis of both front and rear legs. Some affected foals cannot stand to nurse. In others, these symptoms may not be seen for several weeks. Ooh, that's actually scary. This is the only cervical spinal cord disease seen in horses less than 1 month of age, and a radiograph can diagnose the condition. There is now a genetic test for OAAMA, equine juvenile epilepsy, or juvenile idiopathic epilepsy, sometimes referred to as Benign epilepsy, is not usually fatal. Foals appear normal between epileptic seizures, and seizures usually stop occurring between 12 and 18 months. Affected foals may show signs of epilepsy anywhere from 2 days to 6 months from birth. Seizures can be treated with traditional anti-seizure medications, which may reduce their severity. Though the condition has been studied since 1985 at the University of California, Davis, the genetic mode of inheritance is unclear. Though the cases studied were all of one general bloodline group, recent research updates suggest that a dominant mode of inheritance is involved in strains and pedigrees. For centuries, the Bedouin tracked the ancestry of each horse through an oral tradition. Horses of the purest blood were known as asil, and crossbreeding with non-asil horses was forbidden. Interesting. Mares were the most valued, both for riding and breeding, and pedigree families were traced through the female line. The Bedouin did not believe in gelding male horses and considered stallions too intractable to be good war horses. Thus, they kept very few colts, selling most and culling those of poor quality. Culling as in killing them, which is really like sick and barbaric. Over time, the Bedouin developed several subtypes or strains of Arabian horse, each with unique characteristics, and traced through the maternal line only. According to the Arabian Horse Association, the 5 primary strains were known as the Kahalen, Seglawe, Abian, Hamdani, and Hadban. I just butchered those. Colonel Roswan, a promoter and writer about Arabian horses from the middle of the 20th century, held the belief that there are only 3 strains: Kahilon, Seglawe, and Monarchy. Roswan felt that these strains represented body types of the breed, with the Kahelian being masculine, the Seglawe being feminine, and the Muniki being speedy. There were also lesser strains, substrains, and regional variations in strain names. Therefore, many Arabian horses were not only asil of pure blood, but also bred to be pure in strain, with crossbreeding between strains discouraged, though not forbidden, by some tribes. Purity of bloodline was very important to the Bedouin, and they also believed in telegony, believing if a mare was ever to breed to a stallion of impure blood, the mare herself and all future offspring would be contaminated by the stallion and hence no longer asil. This complex web of bloodline and strain was an integral part of Bedouin culture. They not only knew the pedigrees and history of their best war mares in detail, but also carefully tracked the breeding of their camels, Saluki dogs, and their own family or tribal history. Eventually, written records began to be kept. The first written pedigrees in the Middle East that specifically used the term Arabian date to 1330 AD. As important as strain was to the Bedouin, modern studies of mitochondrial DNA suggest that Arabian horses alive today, with records stating descent from a given strain, may not actually share a common maternal ancestry. So, the historic development, this is where their development came in. Fiery war horses with dished faces and high carried tails were popular artistic subjects in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, often depicted pulling chariots in war or for hunting. Horses with oriental characteristics appear in later artwork as far north as that of ancient Greece and the Roman Empire. While this type of horse was not called an Arabian in the ancient Near East until later, the word Arabia or Arabia first appeared in writing in ancient Persia, c. 500 BC. These Proto-Arabians shared many characteristics with the modern Arabian, including speed, endurance, and refinement. For example, a horse skeleton unearthed in the Sinai Peninsula dated to 1700 BC and probably brought by the Hyksos invaders is considered the earliest physical evidence of the horse in ancient Egypt. This horse had a wedge-shaped head, large eye sockets, and small muzzle, all characteristics of the Arabian horse. Now that's big brain and not tiny brain. In Islamic history, following the Hijra in AD 622, also sometimes spelled Hegira, the Arabian horse spread across the known world of the time and became recognized as a distinct named breed. It played a significant role in the history of the Middle East and of Islam. By 630, Muslim influence expanded across the Middle East and North Africa. By 711, Muslim warriors had reached Spain, and they controlled most of the Iberian Peninsula by 720. Their war horses were of various oriental types, including both Arabians and the barb horse of North Africa. Arabian horses also spread to the rest of the world via the Ottoman Empire, which rose in 1299. Though it never fully dominated the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, this Turkish empire obtained many Arabian horses through trade, diplomacy, and war. The Ottomans encouraged formation of private stud farms in order to ensure a supply of cavalry horses, and Ottoman nobles, such as Muhammad Ali of Egypt, also collected pure desert-bred Arabian horses. El-Nasiri, or Al-Nasir Muhammad, Sultan of Egypt, 1290 to 1342, imported and bred numerous Arabians in Egypt. A stud farm record was made of his purchases, describing many of the horses as well as their abilities, and was deposited in his library, becoming a source for later study. Though the Ottomans, through the Ottomans, Arabian horses were often sold, traded, or given as diplomatic gifts to Europeans and later to Americans. Egypt. Historically, Egyptian breeders imported horses bred in the deserts of Palestine and the Arabian Peninsula as the source of their foundation bloodstock. By the time the Ottoman Empire dominated Egypt, the political elites of the region still recognized the need for quality bloodstock for both war and for horse racing. and some continued to return to the deserts to obtain pure-blooded Arabians. One of the most famous was Muhammad Ali of Egypt, also known as Muhammad Ali Pasha, who established an extensive stud farm in the 19th century. After his death, some of his stock was bred on by Abbas I of Egypt, also known as Abbas Pasha. However, after Abbas Pasha was assassinated in 1854, his heir, Elhami Pasha, sold most of his horses, often for crossbreeding, and gave away many others as diplomatic gifts. A remnant of the herd was obtained by Ali Pasha of Sharif, who then went back to the desert to bring in new bloodstock. At its peak, the stud of Ali Pasha Sharif had over 400 purebred Arabians. That's a lot. Unfortunately, an epidemic of African horse sickness in the 1870s that killed thousands of horses throughout Egypt decimated much of his herd, wiping out several irreplaceable bloodlines. Late in his life, he sold several horses to Wilfred and Lady Anne Blunt, who exported them to Crabbit Park Stud in England. After his death, Lady Anne was also able to gather many remaining horses at her Sheikh Abiad Stud. Meanwhile, the passion brought by the Blunts to saving the pure horse of the desert helped Egyptian horse breeders to convince their government of the need to preserve the best of their own remaining pure Arabian bloodstock that descended from the horses collected over the previous century by Muhammad Ali Pasha, Abbas Pasha, and Ali Pasha Sharif. The government of Egypt formed the Royal Agricultural Society, or RAS, or RAS, in 1908, which is known today as the Egyptian Agricultural Organization, or EAO, or EO. RAS representatives traveled to England during the 1920s and purchased 18 descendants of the original Blunt exports from Lady Wentworth at Crabbit Park, and returned these bloodlines to Egypt in order to restore bloodlines had been lost. Other than several horses purchased by Henry Babson for importation to the United States in the 1930s, and one other small group exported to the U.S. in 1947, relatively few Egyptian-bred Arabian horses were exported until the overthrow of King Farouk I in 1952. Many of the private stud farms of the princess were then confiscated and the animals taken over by the EAO. In the 1960s and 1970s, as oil development brought more foreign investors to Egypt, some of whom were horse fanciers, Arabians were exported to Germany and to the United States, as well as the former Soviet Union. Today, the designation straight Egyptian or Egyptian Arabian is popular with some Arabian breeders, and the modern Egyptian-bred Arabian is an outcross used to add refinement in some breeding programs. Their arrival in Europe. Probably the earliest horses with Arabian bloodlines to enter Europe came indirectly through Spain and France. Others would have arrived with returning crusaders, beginning in 1095. European armies invaded Palestine, and many knights returned home with Arabian horses as spoils of war. Later, as knights and the heavy, armored war horses who carried them became obsolete, Arabian horses and their descendants were used to develop faster, agile, light cavalry horses that were used in warfare into the 20th century. Another major infusion of Arabian horses into Europe occurred when the Ottoman Turks sent 300,000 horsemen into Hungary in 1522, not to be confused with Frisco 1522, the old 482 mountain type steam locomotive, many of whom were mounted on pure-blooded Arabians, captured during raids into Arabia. By 1529, the Ottomans reached Vienna, where they were stopped by the Polish and Hungarian armies, who captured these horses from the defeated Ottoman cavalry. Some of these animals provided foundation bloodstock for the major studs of Eastern Europe. Polish and Russian breeding programs. With the rise of light cavalry, the stamina and agility of horses with Arabian blood gave an enormous military advantage to any army who possessed them. As a result, many European monarchs began to support large breeding establishments that crossed Arabians on local stock. One example being Kinzyna, the royal stud of Polish King Zygmunt II August, and another, the imperial Russian stud of Peter the Great. European horse breeders also obtained Arabian stock directly from the desert or via trade with the Ottomans. In Russia, Count Alexei Orlov obtained many Arabians, including Smetanka, that's Russian, an Arabian stallion who became a foundation sire of the Orlov Trotter. Orlov then provided Arabian horses to Catherine the Great, who in 1772 owned 12 pure Arabian stallions and 10 mares. By 1889, two members of the Russian nobility, Count Stroganov and Prince Nikolai Borisovich Shcherbetov, established Arabian stud farms to meet the continued need to breed Arabians as a source of pure bloodstock. To Poland, notable imports from Arabia included those of Prince Hieronymus Sanguzko, 1743 to 1812, who founded the Slawata stud, Poland's first state-run Arabian stud farm. Janał Podlaski was established by the decree of Alexander I of Russia in 1817, and by 1850 the great stud farms of Poland were well established, including Antonini, owned by the Polish court Potocki, who had married into the Sanguzki family. Later notable as the farm that produced the stallion Skowronek. Central and Western Europe. The 18th century marked the establishment of most of the great Arabian studs of Europe, dedicated to preserving pure Arabian bloodstock. The Prussians set up a royal stud in 1732, originally intended to provide horses for their royal stables, and other studs were established to breed animals for other uses, including mounts for the Prussian army. The foundation of these breeding programs was the crossing of Arabians on native horses. By 1873, some English observers felt that the Prussian cavalry mounts were superior in endurance to those of the British, and credited Arabian bloodlines for their superiority. Other state studs included the Babona stud of Hungary, set up in 1789, and the well stud in Germany, now Marbach or Marbach stud, founded in 1817 by King William of Württemberg. King James I of England imported the first Arabian stallion, the Markham Arabian, to England in 1616. Arabians were also introduced into European racehorse breeding, especially in England via the Darley Arabian, Bayerly Turk, and Godolphin Arabian. The three foundation stallions of the modern thoroughbred breed, who were each brought to England during the 18th century. Other monarchs obtained Arabian horses, often as personal mounts. One of the most famous Arabian stallions in Europe was Marengo, the war horse ridden by Napoleon Bonaparte. And we all know him from learning him in history class. During the mid-19th century, the need for Arabian blood to improve the breeding stock for light cavalry horses in Europe resulted in more excursions to the Middle East, not to be confused with the excursion I went on. Queen Isabel II of Spain sent representatives to the desert to purchase Arabian horses, and by 1847 had established a stud book. Her successor, King Alfonso XII, which I have no idea what that is, imported additional bloodstock from the European nations. By 1893, the state military stud farm, Yeguada Militar, was established in Cordoba, Spain, for breeding both Arabian and Iberian horses. The military remained heavily involved in the importation of breeding, in the importation and breeding of Arabians in Spain well into the 20th century, and the Yeguada Militar is still in existence today. Interesting. The period also marked a phase of considerable travel to the Middle East by European civilians and minor nobility, and in the process, some travelers noticed that the Arabian horse, as a pure breed of horse, was under threat due to modern forms of warfare, inbreeding, and other problems that were reducing the horse population of the Bedouin tribes at a rapid rate. By the late 19th century, the most far-sighted began in earnest to collect the finest Arabian horses they could find in order to preserve the blood of the pure desert horse for future generations. The most famous example was Lady Anne Blunt, the daughter of Ada Lovelace and granddaughter of Lord Byron. Rise of the Crabbed Park Stud. Perhaps the most famous of all Arabian breeding operations founded in Europe was the Crabbed Park Stud of England, founded 1878. Starting in 1877, Wilfred Scawin Blunt and Lady Anne Blunt made repeated journeys to the Middle East, including visits to the stud of Ali Pasha Sharif in Egypt and to Bedouin tribes in the Nejd, bringing the best Arabians they could find to England. Lady Anne also purchased and maintained the Sheikh Abid stud farm in Egypt, near Cairo, which is the capital of Egypt today. Upon Lady Anne's death in 1917, the Blunt's daughter, Judith Lady Wentworth, inherited the Wentworth title and Lady Anne's portion of the estate, and obtained the remainder of the Crabbed stud following a protracted legal battle with her father. Lady Wentworth expanded the stud, added new bloodstock, and exported Arabian horses worldwide. Upon her death in 1957, which is the same day that my foster dad Pa was born, or Rick, the stock passed to her manager, Cecile Covey, who ran Crabbed until 1971, when a motorway was cut through the property, forcing the sale of the land and dispersal of the horses. Along with Crabbed, the Hampstead stud of Lady Yule also produced horses of worldwide significance. Early 20th century Europe. In the early 20th century, the military was involved in the breeding of Arabian horses throughout Europe, particularly in Poland, Spain, Germany, and Russia. Private breeders also developed a number of breeding programs. Significant among the private breeders in continental Europe were Spain's Cristobal Colon de Aguilera, XV Duque de Veragua, a direct descendant of Christopher Columbus, who founded the Veragua stud in the 1920s. God, I'm just butchering these names, so I deeply apologize if I butcher your languages. Modern warfare and its impact on European studs. Between World War I, the Russian Revolution, and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, many historic European stud farms were lost. In Poland, the Antoni and Slawuta studs were wiped out except for 5 mares. Notable among the survivors was the Janau Podlasky stud. The Russian Revolution, combined with the effects of World War I, destroyed most of the breeding programs in Russia. But by 1921, the Soviet government re-established the Arabian program, the Tursk stud, on the site of the former Stroganov estate, which included Polish bloodstock as well as some importations from the Krabbit stud of England. The programs that survived the war were reestablished. That survived the war reestablished their breeding operations, and some added to their studs. With new imports of desert-bred Arabian horses from the Middle East, not all European studs recovered. The Wels stud of Germany, founded by King Wilhelm I, went into considerable decline. By the time the wheel herd was transferred to the Marbach State stud in 1932, only 17 pure-blood Arabians remained. The Spanish Civil War and World War II had also had a devastating impact on the horse breeding throughout Europe. The Veragua stud was destroyed, and its records lost, with the only survivors being the brood mares and the younger horses, who were rescued by Francisco Franco. Krabbit Park Tursk and Janau Podlasky survived. Both the Soviet Union and the United States obtained valuable Arabian bloodlines as spoils of war, which they used to strengthen their breeding programs. The Soviets had taken steps to protect their breeding stock at Tursk stud, and by utilizing horses captured in Poland, they were able to reestablish their breeding program soon after the end of World War II, which was when Nickel Plate Road 765 was working at the time. The Americans brought Arabian horses captured in Europe to the United States, mostly to the Pomona, a U.S. Army remount station, the former W.K. Kellogg Ranch in California. In the post-war era, Poland, Spain, and Germany developed or re-established many well-respected Arabian stud farms. The studs of Poland in particular were decimated by both the Nazis and the Soviets, but were also able to reclaim some of their breeding stock and became particularly world-renowned for their quality Arabian horses. Tested rigorously by racing and other performance standards. During the 1950s, the Russians also obtained additional horses from Egypt to augment their breeding programs. After the Cold War, while only a few Arabians were exported from behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War, those who did come to the West caught the eye of breeders worldwide. Improved international relations between Eastern Europe and the West led to major imports of Polish and Russian-bred Arabian horses to Western Europe and the United States in the 1970s and 1980s. The collapse of the former Soviet Union in 1991, greater political stability in Egypt, and the rise of the European Union all increased international trade in Arabian horses. Organizations such as the World Arabian Horse Association or the WHO or WAO created consistent standards for transferring the registration of Arabian horses between different nations. Today, Arabian horses are traded all over the world. In America, the first horses on the American mainland since the end of the Ice Age arrived with the Spanish conquistadors. Hernan Cortez brought 16 horses of Andalusian, Barb, and Arabian ancestry to Mexico in 1519. Others followed, such as Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, who brought 250 horses of similar breeding to America in 1540. More horses followed with each new arrival of conquistadors, missionaries, and settlers. Many horses escaped or were stolen, becoming the foundation stock of the American Mustang. So, so Arabians are actually are actually ancestors of the Mustang, which I never knew that. Not to be confused with the car, the Mustang. Early imports. Colonists from England also brought the horses of Arabian breeding to the eastern seaboard. One example was Nathaniel Harrison, who imported a horse of Arabian, Barb, and Turkish ancestry to America in 1747. One of George Washington's primary mounts during the American Revolutionary War was a gray half-Arabian horse named Blueskin, sired by the stallion Ranger, also known as Lindsay's Arabian, said to have been obtained from the Sultan of Morocco. Other presidents are linked to ownership of Arabian horses. In 1840, President Martin Van Buren received 2 Arabians from the Sultan of Oman, and in 1877, President Ulysses S. Grant obtained an Arabian stallion, Leopard, and a barb, Linden Tree, as gifts from Abdul Hamid II, the Sultan of Turkey. King Richard was the first American known to have specifically bred Arabian horses. He traveled to the desert in 1853 and 1856 to obtain breeding stock, which he crossed on thoroughbreds, and also bred purebred Arabians. Unfortunately, his horses were lost during the Civil War and have no known purebred Arabian descendants today. Another major U.S. political figure, William H. Seward, purchased 4 Arabians in Beirut in 1859, prior to becoming a Secretary of State to Abraham Lincoln. Leopard is the only stallion imported prior to 1888 who left known purebred descendants in America. In 1888, Randolph Huntington imported the desert-bred Arabian, Mar Naomi, and bred her to Leopard, producing Leopard's only purebred Arabian son, Anazeh, who sired 8 purebred Arabian foals, 4 of whom still appear in pedigrees today. Development of purebred breeding in America. In 1908, the Arabian Horse Registry of America was established, recording 71 animals, and by 1994, the number had reached 500,000. Today, there are more Arabians registered in North America than in the rest of the world put together. The origins of the registry date to 1893, when the Hamadi Society sponsored an exhibit of Arabian horses from what today is Syria at the World Fair in Chicago. This expedition raised considerable interest in Arabian horses. Records are unclear if 40 or 45 horses were imported for the exposition, but 7 died in a fire shortly after arrival. The 28 horses that remained at the end of the expedition stayed in America and were sold at auction when the Hamadi Society went bankrupt. These horses caught the interest of American breeders, including Peter Bradley of the Hingham Stock Farm, who purchased some Hamadi horses at the auction, and Homer Davenport, another admirer of the Hamid imports. Major Arabian importations to the United States included those of Davenport and Bradley, who teamed up to purchase several stallions and mares directly from the Bedouin in 1906. Spencer Borden of the Interlaken Stud made several importations between 1898 and 1911, which 1911 was when Southern 4501 was built. And W.R. Brown of the Minesboro Stud, interested in the Arabian as a cavalry mount, imported many Arabians over a period of years, starting in 1918. Another wave of imports came into the 1920s and 30s when breeders such as W.K. Kellogg, Henry Babson, Roger Selby, James Draper, and others imported Arabian bloodstock from Crabbit Park Stud in England, as well as from Poland, Spain, and Egypt. The breeding of Arabians was fostered by the U.S. Army Remount Service, which stood purebred stallions at public stud for a reduced rate. Several Arabians, mostly of Polish breeding, were captured from Nazi Germany and imported to the U.S. following World War II. In 1957, 2 deaths in England led to more sales to the United States. First from Crabbit a stud on the demise of Lady Wentworth, and then the Hampstead with the passing of Gladys Ewell. As the tensions of the Cold War eased, more Arabians were imported to America from Poland and Egypt, and in the late 1970s, as political issues surrounded import regulations and the recognition of stud books were resolved, many Arabian horses were imported from Spain and Russia. Modern trends. This may be a long one. In the 1980s, Arabians became a popular status symbol and were marketed similarly to fine art. Some individuals also used horses as a tax shelter. Prices skyrocketed, especially in the United States, with a record-setting public auction price for a mare, NH Love Potion, was sold for $2.55 million in 1984, and the largest syndication in history for an Arabian stallion, Padron, at $11 million, which is ridiculous. The potential for profit led to overbreeding of the Arabian. When the Tax Reform Act of 1986 closed the tax sheltering passive investment a loophole, limiting the use of horse farms as tax shelters. The Arabian market was particularly vulnerable due to oversaturation and artificially inflated prices, and it collapsed, forcing many breeders into bankruptcy and sending many purebred Arabians to slaughter, which is shocking. Prices recovered slowly, with many breeders moving away from producing living art and towards a horse more suitable for amateur owners and many riding disciplines. By 2003, a survey found that 67% of purebred Arabian horses in America are owned by recreational riding purposes. As of 2013, there are more than 660,000 Arabians that have been registered in the United States, and the U.S. has the largest number of Arabians of any nation in the world. So in Australia, g'day, mate. So now we're going to the land down under. Arabian horses were introduced to Australia in the earliest days of European settlement. Early imports included both purebred Arabians and light Spanish Janets from Andalusia. Many Arabians also came from India, based on records describing stallions of Arabic and Persian blood. The first Arabian horses were probably imported to Australia in several groups between 1788 and 1802. About 1803, a merchant named Robert Campbell imported a bay Arabian stallion, Hector, from India. Wait a minute, that's not an Indian name, that's an American name. Hector was said to have been owned by Arthur Wellesley, who later became known as the Duke of Wellington. In 1804, 2 additional Arabians, also from India, arrived in Tasmania, one of whom, White William, sired the first purebred Arabian foal born in Australia, a stallion named Derwent. Throughout the 19th century, many more Arabians came to Australia, though most were used to produce crossbred horses and left no recorded purebred descendants. The first significant imports to be permanently recorded with offspring still appearing in modern purebred Arabian pedigrees were those of James Bowcott, who in 1891 imported several Arabians from Wilfred and Lady Anne Blunt's Crabbed Arabian stud in England. Purebred Arabians were used to improve racehorses, and some of them became quite famous as such. About 100 Arabian sires are included in the Australian stud book for thoroughbred racehorses. The military was also involved in the promotion of breeding cavalry horses, especially around World War I. They were part of the foundation of several breeds considered unequally Australian, including the Australian pony, the Waller, and the Australian stock horse. Into the 20th and 21st centuries. In the early 20th century, more Arabian horses, mostly of Crabbed bloodlines, arrived in Australia. The first Arabians of Polish breeding arrived in 1966, and Egyptian lines were first imported in 1970. Arabian horses from the rest of the world followed, and today the Australian Arabian Horse Registry is the second largest in the world, next to that of the United States. So this guy's might be a very long one. So yeah, modern breeding. Arabian horses today are found all over the world. They are no longer classified as Bedouin strain, but are informally classified by the nation of origin of formed horses in a given pedigree. Popular types of Arabians are labeled Polish, Spanish, Crabbed, Russian, Egyptian, and domestic. Describing horses whose ancestors were imported to the United States prior to 1944, which was when 765 was built, including those from programs such as from Kellogg, Davenport, Mainsboro, Babson, Dixon, and Selby. In the USA, a specific mixture of Crabbed, Mainsboro, and Kellogg bloodlines has acquired the copyrighted designation CMK. Each set of bloodlines has its own devoted followers, with the virtues of each hotly debated. Most debates are between those who value the Arabian most for its refined beauty and those who value the horse for its stamina and athleticism. There are also a number of breeders who specialize in preservation breeding of bloodlines. Controversies exist over the relative purity of certain animals. Breeders argue about the genetic purity of various pedigrees, discussing whether some horses descend from impure animals that cannot be traced to the desert Bedouin. The major factions are as follows. The Arabian Horse Association, or AHA, states, the origin of the purebred Arabian horse was the Arabian desert, and all Arabians ultimately traced their lineage to this source. In essence, all horses accepted for registration in the United States are deemed to be purebred Arabians by AHA. The World Arabian Horse Association, or WAHO, has the broadest definition of a purebred Arabian. WAHO states, a purebred Arabian horse is one which appears in any purebred Arabian stud book or registry listed by WAHO as acceptable. By this definition, over 95% of the known purebred Arabian horses in the world are registered in stud books acceptable to WAHO. WAHO also researched the purity question in general, and its findings are on its website, describing both the research and the political issues surrounding Arabian horse bloodlines, particularly in America. At the other end of the spectrum, organizations focused on bloodlines that are the most meticulously documented to desert sources have the most restrictive definitions. For example, the Osel Club in Europe only accepts a horse whose pedigree is exclusively based on Bedouin breeding of the Arabian Peninsula, without any crossbreeding with non-Arabian horses at any time. Likewise, the Al-Khamsa organization takes the position that the horse which are called Al-Khamsa Arabian horses are those horses in North America that can reasonably be assumed to descend entirely from Bedouin Arabian horses bred by horse breeding Bedouin tribes of the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula without admixture from sources unacceptable to Al-Kamsa. More restrictive of all are horses identified as straight Egyptian by the Pyramid Society, which must trace in all lines to the desert and also trace to horses owned or bred by specific Egyptian breeding programs. By this definition, straight Egyptian Arabians constitute only 2% of all Arabian horses in America. Ironically, some pure-blooded desert-bred Arabians in Syria had enormous difficulties being accepted as registrable purebred Arabians because many of the Bedouin who owned them saw no need to obtain a price of paper to verify the purity of their horses. However, eventually the Syrians developed a stud book for their animals that was accepted by the World Arabian Horse Association (WAHO) in 2007. So, influence on other horse breeds. Because of the genetic strength of the desert-bred Arabian horse, Arabian bloodlines have played a part in the development of nearly every modern light horse breed, including the thoroughbred, Orloff Trotter, Morgan, American Standardbred, American Quarter Horse, and warm blood breeds such as the Trakehner. Arabian bloodlines have also influenced the development of the Welsh Pony, the Australian Stock Horse, per Karen Draft Horse, Appaloosa, and the Colorado Ranger Horse. Today, people cross Arabians with other breeds to add refinement, endurance, agility, and beauty. In the USA, half Arabians have their own registry within the Arabian Horse Association, which includes a special section for Anglo-Arabians, Arabian thoroughbred crosses. Some crosses originally registered only as half Arabians became popular enough to have their own breed registry, including the National Show Horse and an Arabian Saddlebred Cross, the Quarab Arabian Quarter Horse, the Pintabane, the Wellara Arabian Welsh Pony, and the Marab Arabian Morgan. In addition, some Arabians and half Arabians have been approved for breeding by some warm blood registries, particularly the Trakehner Registry. There is intense debate over the role of Arabian played. There is intense debate over the role the Arabian played in the development of other light horse breeds. Before DNA-based research developed, one hypothesis, based on body types and conformation, suggested the light, dry Oriental horse adapted to the desert climate had developed prior to domestication. DNA studies of multiple horse breeds now suggest that while domesticated horses arose from multiple mare lines, there is very little variability in the Y chromosome between breeds. Following domestication of the horse, due to the location of the Middle East as crossroads of the ancient world and relatively near the earliest locations of domestication, Oriental horses spread throughout Europe and Asia in both ancient and modern times. There is little doubt that humans crossed Oriental blood on that of other types to create light riding horses. The only actual question are at what point the Oriental prototype could be called an Arabian. How much Arabian blood was mixed with local animals, and at what point in history? For some breeds, such as the thoroughbred, Arabian influence on specific animals is documented in written stud books. For older breeders, dating the influx of Arabian ancestry is more difficult. For example, while outside cultures and the horses they brought with them influenced the predecessor of the Iberian horse in both the time of ancient Rome and again with the Islamic invasions of the 8th century, it is difficult to trace precise details of the journeys taken by waves of conquerors and their horses as they traveled from the Middle East to North America and across Gibraltar and influenced one another. Though these studies did not compare Andalusian and Barb mtDNA to that of Arabian horses, there is evidence that horses resembling Arabians, whether before or after the breed was called an Arabian, were parts of this genetic mix. Arabians and Barbs, though probably related to one another, are quite different in appearance. The horses of both Arabian and Barb type were present in the Muslim armies that occupied Europe. There is also historical documentation that Islamic invaders raised Arabian horses in Spain prior to the Reconquista. The Spanish also documented imports of Arabian horses in 1847, 1884, and 1885 that were used to improve existing Spanish stock and revive declining equine populations. Wow, that was actually a lot of reading. Now, I'm honestly surprised of the history of the Arabians. Like these beautiful, sexy stallions or mares, or whatever they are, they have a huge mixture of different origins. And now, for last but not least, the uses. Arabians are versatile horses that compete in many equestrian fields, including horse racing, the horse show, disciplines of saddle seat, western pleasure, and hunt seat, as well as dressage, cutting, reining, endurance, riding, show jumping, eventing, youth events such as equitation, and others. They are used as pleasure riding, trail riding, and working ranch horses for those who are not interested in competition. Which I guess that's fair. Competition. Arabians dominate the sport of endurance racing, endurance riding, because of their stamina. They are the leading breed in competitions such as the Tevis Cup that can cover up to 100 miles or 160 kilometers in a day, and they participate in FEI sanctioned endurance events worldwide, including the World Equestrian Games. There is an extensive series of horse shows in the United States and Canada for Arabian, half Arabian, and Anglo-Arabian horses, sanctioned by the USEF in conjunction with the Arabian Horse Association. Classes offered include a Western Pleasure, reining, hunter type, and saddle seat English Pleasure, and halter, plus the very popular native costume class. Sport horse events for Arabian horses have become popular in North America, particularly after the Arabian Horse Association began hosting a separate Arabian and half Arabian sport horse national championship in 2003. That by 2004 grew to draw 2,000 entries. This competition draws Arabians and part Arabian horses that perform in hunter, jumper, sport horse under saddle, sport horse in hand, dressage, and combined driving competition. Other nations also sponsor major shows strictly for purebred and part-bred Arabians, including Great Britain, France, Spain, Portland, and the United Arab Emirates, which is where the Lycan Hypersport was made. Purebred Arabians have excelled in open events against other breeds. One of the most famous examples in the field of West riding competition was the Arabian mare Ronteza, who defeated 50 horses of all breeds to win the 1961 Reined Cow Horse Championship at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, California. Another Arabian competitive against all breeds was the stallion Araf, who won an all-breed cutting horse competition at the Quarter Horse Congress in the 1950s. In show jumping and show hunter competition, a number of Arabians have competed successfully against other breeds in open competition, including the purebred gelding Russian Roulette, who has won multiple jumping classes against against horses of all breeds on the open circuit, and in eventing, a purebred Arabian competed on the Brazilian team at the 2004 Athens Olympics. Part Arabians have also appeared at open sport horse events and even Olympic level competition. The Anglo-Arabian Linen was ridden to an Olympic silver medal for France in dressage in 1928 and 1932, as well as a team gold in 1932. And another French Anglo-Arabian, Harpagon, was ridden to a team gold medal and an individual silver dressage at the 1948 Olympics. At the 1952 Olympics, the French rider Pierre de Oriola won the gold individual medal in show jumping on the Anglo-Arabian Alibaba. Another Anglo-Arabian, Tamarillo, ridden by William Foxpitt, represents the United Kingdom in FEE and Olympic competition, winning many awards, including first place at the 2004 badminton horse trials. More recently, a gelding named Theodore O'Connor, nicknamed Teddy, a 14.1 or 14.2 sources vary, hand pony of thoroughbred, Arabian, and Shetland pony breeding, won 2 gold medals at the 2007 Pan American Games and was finished in the top 6 at the 2007 and 2008 Rolex Kentucky 3-day CCI competition. Last but not least, the other activities. Arabians are involved in a wide variety of activities, including fairs, movies, parodies, circuses, and other places where horses are showcased. They have been popular in movies dating back to the silent film era when Randolph Valentino wrote the Kellogg Arabian Stallion Jadon in 1926's Son of the Sheik, and have been seen in many other films, including The Black Stallion featured the Stallion Casole, The Young Black Stallion, which used over 40 Arabians during filming, as well as Hidalgo and the 1959 version of Ben-Hur. Arabians are mascots for football teams, performing crowd-pleasing activities on the field and sidelines. One of the horses who serves as Traveler, the mascot of the University of Southern California Trojans, has a purebred Arabian, Thunder. A stage name for the purebred Arabian stallion, J.B. Kobask, was mascot for the Denver Broncos from 1993 until his retirement in 2004. When the Arabian gelding Winter Solstice took over as Thunder II, Cal Poly Pomona's W.K. Kellogg Arabian Horse Center Equestrian Unit has made Arabian horses a regular sight at the annual Tournament of Roses Parade held each New Year's Day in Pasadena, California. Arabians also are used on search and rescue teams and occasionally for police work. Some Arabians are used in polo in the U.S. and Europe, in the Turkish equestrian sport of Siret, as well as in circuses, therapeutic horseback riding programs, and on guest ranches. Okay, catch my breath. Oh my god. This is going to be a long one. Like, guys, I love Arabians. Now, before I round the video off here, I'm actually going to show you some pictures of Arabians. And my Arabian is called Rosie, and she is a darling beauty. So, guys, take a look at these beauties. Look at them. These horses are gorgeous, but ooh, this one, I really like this one. Black looks really good. So, oh my god, the white looks beautiful. Look at that. And they also come in this like coffee brown color. And there's also this one that's in like this volcanic ash color. And there's also this one which is in that sandy color. Okay, so are there any red chestnut? So okay, so the Arabian that I have in Red Dead Redemption 2 is a red chestnut Arabian. So let's see if I can find a red chestnut. Now, this is a real-life horse, in fact, the red chestnut Arabian. And God, they are beautiful. Guys, look at that. Red chestnut. That is gorgeous. That is fucking gorgeous. So, this is the red chestnut Arabian that's now in Red Dead Redemption, that's now in Red Dead Online. And I have one, and her name is Rosie. And look at this one. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, in my opinion, Arabians are the most beautiful horse breed in the world. At least in my opinion. But just look at that. Absolutely majestic. But this one here, let me see if I can find a better picture here of a red chestnut Arabian. Dude, these horses are gorgeous. Like, dude. This breed is by far my favorite horse breed of all time, is the Arabian. Along with the Mustang, which if you guys want me to do the Mustang, then I'll be happy to do the Mustang. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to do the Mustang later today. But anyway, this, guys, is going to wrap it up for episode 3 of RDR2 Horse and Facts. So if you all have enjoyed this, then do not forget to, as always, just smash that like button, drop a comment, and wreck that subscribe button, and get that bing notification bell button on so that you all don't miss any videos from me, videos just like this one. And I will see you lot next time. Peace out, lads.